Hello, and today on DWVP we are discussing the top 5 hardest Cuphead bosses. I'm Eric, and I'm here with my partner Annalise.
Alright, let's get right into it. So at number 5, for the least difficult of these bosses, we have the Devil.
So, what did you think was the hardest part about the Devil?
Honestly, he was really surprisingly not that difficult.
Yeah, I was genuinely surprised because I assumed that the Devil, being the final, was going to be much harder than King Dice, but I actually found him to be quite easier.
The only thing that I think I had difficulty with was his spear attacks, where he'd spin his spear and you would see like the blue and variable balls pop up, or like the flames pop up, mostly because it was the most unpredictable of all of his attacks.
Yeah. See, I definitely agree. I think he was hard initially, but after a while he became sort of predictable, and you could easily get through his first stage, then his second stage, and his third stage is relatively easy.
Yeah, once you're able to get him into his face where he's crying and stuff like that, he's honestly incredibly easy.
I think the hardest part is that you're already tense because it's the final boss, so you're expecting it to be really difficult, so you make it difficult.
Yeah, there's a sense of intensity there.
Yeah, especially with the music in the background.
Yeah.
So, if we had to go on a scale of 1 to 5 cups on how difficult this boss is, what would you give it?
You know what? I'd say only a 2 out of 5 cups. It's still one of the difficult bosses, but it's not the most difficult boss.
Yeah, I can definitely agree with that. And with that, we are moving on to number 4. With number 4, we have Grim Matchstick. If you don't mind, I'll be giving it this one. I definitely think the hardest part about Grimm's level, and he shares this with Rumor Honeybottom's, is the constant moving of the platforms.
Ugh.
Now, at least you can hit his third and second phases, but it's definitely difficult when you're having to jump, especially when some of the platforms aren't there.
Yeah, I'm one of those people who has extreme difficulty with dashing and jumping and stuff like that, which is a pretty essential part of the game, but it's one of those things that I'm pretty rough at, and so when the platforms are constantly moving and stuff like that, it's incredibly difficult, especially when it's your first, run of playing that boss. It gets really difficult.
Yeah, I can definitely agree with that, because especially when he starts shooting out the flaming rocks, I always call them meatballs.
Yeah.
When he starts shooting out those flaming meatballs,
Yeah.
you can kind of, you need to jump to different platforms to avoid them, which is very difficult when sometimes the platform isn't there.
Yeah, there's a lot of times where you'll jump and the platform just isn't there, and it forces you to lose a life, essentially.
And if we're discussing about his second phase, it's very difficult because he's on the other side of the screen, so that the platforms are moving towards him, and then you have the little flame boys jumping up at you.
The flame boys.
The
I
little
hate the
boys.
flame boys.
Terrible. And the third phase is just really hard to see with the rain in the background.
Yeah, and then it hits you with, I call it the gas tank thing.
The gas tank.
And it's like the flame, it gets really intense, and it's one of the levels that I found myself wanting to, quit constantly and just give up.
So if I had to rate this from 1 to 5 cups on difficulty, I would have to give this a 3 out of 5. I think
Yeah, 3 out of 5 cups.
3 out of 5.
More difficult than the Devil, but still, and it's still one of the difficult bosses, but not the most difficult again. Alright, so going on to number 3, we have a very similar boss to Grim Matchstick. We have Rumor Honeybottom's.
Yeah, definitely. They both have that constantly moving level, but I would say Rumors is a little more difficult because at least with Grimm's, it's moving from right to left, which is how you would move in a running gun.
Yeah.
But with this, it's moving from top to bottom, which is really difficult, especially when the bottom of the floor you cannot touch.
Yes.
And that really makes her final phase is really hard to hit. So unless you have the chaser, it's extremely hard to hit her when she's on the bottom of the screen in her airplane form. Especially with those attacks she has where she'll take up half the screen with the chainsaw or launch the heat-seeking missile hands at you.
Yeah, it's definitely one of those levels where it's really good to have a specific gun, but if you don't have that specific gun, it becomes instantly 10 times more difficult.
Yeah, and of course it is doable, but I would definitely say it's one of the harder bosses.
Definitely one of the harder ones. And it's also one of those, Cuphead does this thing where there's a lot of things that are popping up on screen, but they're not things that can hurt you. So during this level, there's a lot of honey dripping from the ceiling and stuff like that, and it tricks your mind into thinking that's something that can harm you, so you avoid it. But it's not something that can harm you. It's just one of their mind tricks that they play.
All right, nice psychological input.
Yeah.
I'd also definitely say her second phase is extremely annoying, especially when she pops down, she starts shooting out the little Galaga bee bullets.
Yeah.
And when she's putting the triangle or the variable balls right on top of you. That's
Yeah.
really annoying.
Yeah, it's, again, one of those levels that, just pops random things on top of you while you're playing.
If we were going on the scale of cups, I would have to give her a 3.2 2 almost. 'Cause
Yeah.
she's very similar to Grim Matchstick in difficulty, but I would say she's just a little bit harder and slightly more annoying.
Yeah, solid 3.2 out of 5 cups.
Alright, so carrying it on, we are reaching number 2, the second hardest boss in Cuphead. That would have to be Dr. Cal's robot.
I mean, honestly, this is one of the levels where I started playing it, and within seconds, I was already out.
I think the problem is first you have to learn that he can only be shot in 3 sections, and I surprisingly took a while to figure that out.
Yeah, no, if it hadn't been for Eric telling me, I would have... I definitely would have never.
And there's a lot going on for only 3 sections you can hit, especially with the Galaga in the beginning, the laser that constantly expands when it shoots you. I mean, eventually there is a secret to it, like all Cuphead bosses. There is a way you can defeat it. None of them are too hard. But I would definitely say that this is it's much more difficult than other bosses in the area.
Yeah, it's the difficulty curve compared to the other bosses around this area. It's incredibly difficult, and it's a little more, it's different than most of the other bosses that we've played in Cuphead.
Yeah, definitely, especially other ones where you're in the plane. Like the Genie, Hilda, of course they're all difficult, but this is very different, especially with his long, annoying third phase.
Yeah,
when he pulls out his little Chaos Emerald and he's shooting all those little things at you, it's definitely a very annoying third phase.
Yeah, and it's one of those that you just have to keep dying and replaying it to eventually figure out the patterns and stuff.
How many cups would you give this?
You know, it's definitely one of the more difficult ones, so I'd give it a 4.5 out of 5 cups.
Yeah, I go 4.5, 4.6.
Yeah.
Somewhere in that area.
Somewhere in that area, yeah. Alright, so the most difficult boss in all of Cuphead. I feel like a lot of you guys will agree with us on this one, because it is extremely difficult.
And we're talking about King Dice, the big man himself.
You know, honestly, at the beginning, I didn't think he'd do it to us, but man, he really did do it to us.
Yeah, this in the first half. But I think the hardest part with King Dice is the false hope when you reach the end of it.
Yeah.
Like, at first, you're facing off the mini-bosses, each of which are difficult on their own, but they're manageable.
Yeah, once you learn what they do, that you can get through them.
Especially once you learn how to control the die.
Yeah.
It's really easy to pick which mini-bosses you want. But of course, they are still difficult, so you might lose lives. I know number 9 in particular, or number 5, were very difficult for me.
Yeah, it's one of those where Cuphead does this thing where you have to die a lot to be able to figure out how this boss is played. So in this one, it requires a lot of mini bosses and a lot of dying, and then there's still this huge final battle in the end. Yeah,
that's definitely what got me, because of course you're playing, you hit the start over square, which is terrible, but then you finally reach the end, you think you did it, and then boom, it says the words ready, and suddenly you're tossed into a boss fight with King Dice.
It's totally unexpected.
And you can't practice against him, because as soon as you die from him, you have to go back to fighting the mini-bosses. This is an extremely long boss fight. Most of the other boss fights I could get done in about 2 to 3 minutes, but this one took me 10 minutes on average each time.
Yeah, it's definitely one of the longer bosses, and it's definitely got that huge sense of false hope when you finally reach the end.
And you have to be really good at parrying, and you just don't have many opportunities to practice. I was only able to defeat King Dice because there was a glitch in which his hand would not put out the cards.
You don't know the feeling that you get when all of a sudden he just stops putting out cards and you realize you've completed the game because of a glitch.
But at least I made it to the devil.
Yeah, we made it to the devil.
So I think both of us can agree, and hopefully you too can agree, that he is definitely a 5 out of 5 cups 100%. For difficulty.
If there was a higher ranking, he'd be higher.
He is
5 out of 5.
The hardest.
The hardest.
And that was all. Thanks for watching. Do you agree with us? Let us know in the comments below.
And be prepared for next week's video. It's another Cuphead video. So if you guys like Cuphead, we're doing a little challenge video.
Yep, so we'll make sure we put the link to that in the description as soon as it's uploaded. And as always, make sure you like and subscribe to more content from DWVP.
Alright, see you guys next week.
See you next time.